To install Meteor, just go to Meteor.com and visit the install page. If you're on Windows, you'll have to download the official Meteor installer, but if you're on OS X or Linux, you can simply copy in this command and open Terminal, and in there paste and hit enter, and that's going to download and install Meteor for you. This is going to take a few minutes, so I'll be back when it's done. Okay, so now Meteor has finished downloading and installing, and it's giving us instructions on how to create our first project. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new project by writing Meteor create, and my project name, I'm going to go with an old classic and call it Hello World. And just give it a minute, and there we go. Now I can cd into my project, and we can take a look at what's in here. Meteor created 3 files for us: Hello World CSS, Hello World HTML, and Hello World.js. And to launch our app, we simply write Meteor, and that's going to compile and launch a server, and then we'll be able to visit the app in a localhost URL. Alright, so we can just copy the URL and put that in, and there we go. That's our first Meteor app. It doesn't do much, just click the button and it shows how many times you've pressed it. Let's take a look at what the files are that Meteor created. Actually, the first thing you'll notice is that there's a hidden .meteor folder. Now, you won't really need to interact with this, except maybe the packages file, but we'll leave that to another video. Now, let's open these up and see what's in them. Okay, so our CSS file is actually empty. The HTML file contains very simple template and the document setup, and the Hello World has template helpers and event handlers. Now, we'll cover those in another video. I just wanted to show you what Meteor creates. And to give you a demo of the cool stuff you can do with Meteor and how it works, let's do some editing. First of all, let's see what happens if I edit the CSS file. Let's change the body background color to, let's say, blue. And if I save, Meteor will refresh automatically, and now my color has been changed. Okay, let's remove that because it's ugly. Same with HTML. If I change the title in my HTML document to Hello World, save, Meteor will build the new app and show the changes automatically. And the same thing goes for CSS, or JavaScript. So if I change the file, it'll recompile the app and update the browser automatically. And you can see it says client modified refreshing. And that's it. That's how you get Meteor up and running. And we'll cover more in the next videos. In this video, we're going to have a look at the different parts of Meteor and how they work together. And the first thing you need to know about Meteor is that it runs on both the server and the client. By server, I mean the machine where we run our Meteor applications. So in the previous video, when we ran the Meteor command and started the Meteor server, our computer was the Meteor server. And client is usually the web browser where the user is using our application. It can also mean the mobile application if we create a mobile application using Meteor. But in our case, for now, it just means the browser. And of course, a big part of any application, especially web apps, is the database. Meteor uses mongoDB on the server. MongoDB is a NoSQL database. And if you're coming from a mySQL background or any relational database background, you'll find it quite different, but it's easy to get started with, and it works really nicely with Meteor, and I actually prefer NoSQL databases to relational databases. There is some work to get Meteor working with MySQL and PostgreSQL and other databases. They do have it planned in the future to be part of the core of Meteor, but for now they're just third-party packages, and I'd recommend sticking with MongoDB. On the client, Meteor also has its own database called Minimongo. It's basically a simplified version of Mongo. It was built by Meteor, the Meteor group, and it has the same API as mongoDB, which is important because another benefit of Meteor, since it runs both on the server and the client, is that we can run most of our code in both environments. So we only need to write code once and it'll run both on the server and the client, including database stuff. Plus, Meteor works really nicely with these two databases because it keeps them in sync. So for example, if I insert something into Minimongo, Meteor will automatically push it up to the server and insert it into the mongoDB. And the same thing happens in reverse. So if something gets inserted into mongoDB, Meteor will automatically push it down to the client and insert it into Minimongo. And when Minimongo changes, Meteor will automatically update our UI if something is using data from the Minimongo database. So it's really powerful and really easy. Imagine we were building a chat application, and when I send a new message, the first thing I do is insert it into Minimongo. Meteor will then send that message up to the server and insert it into the Mongo database there, and then push it down automatically to all the connected clients, and it'll pop up on their screen as a message. And we really don't need to do anything extra other than adding the message into the Minimongo database. And then Meteor takes care of the rest, so it's super easy, super fast, and you really don't have to write much code at all. If you're building this with a PHP app, it'll probably take a few hundred lines. With Meteor, this is maybe 15, 20 lines max. So it's really simple and really nice. And to build our UI, we're going to be using something called Blaze. Blaze is a templating language built by Meteor, the Meteor group, and it was designed for Meteor and Minimongo, so it works really well together with them. And it has some nice features such as reactivity, which means that when something in Minimongo changes, Blaze will automatically update the UI for us to reflect the changes in the database. So for example, in our chat app, when the clients received a new message into the Minimongo database, Blaze automatically updates the UI, so we don't even need to write any code for that to happen. So it's really nice and it's really simple to get started with, so we're going to be looking at that in the next video. But I also wanted to mention that since version 1.2, Meteor officially supports React and Angular.js. React is a UI framework built by Facebook, and they use it on Facebook.com and Instagram. And Angular.js is a UI framework built by Google, which they use on some of their products. And actually in our advanced tutorials, we'll be using React because it's more mature and has more features than Blaze, so it's better for larger apps. And well, it's different. Blaze is perfectly fine for most projects, but I prefer React because of the extra features it adds, and you get more control over it basically. So on to our next video, where we're going to be learning about Blaze. Before we move on to Blaze, I just want to take a quick look at how Meteor handles loading code to the server and the client, because sometimes we want to write code that's only for the server and only for the client. For example, with Blaze templates, we only want to load them to the client. So how do we specify where code should be loaded? Well, there's basically three different ways to do this. The first is using a Meteor.isServer or isClient check, and that returns a Boolean. So we would put it in an if statement. So say if Meteor.isServer, then do something. And second method is by creating a server.js or client.js file, and the server.js file will only be loaded to the server, and same thing for the client. The third method is pretty similar. It's by creating a server and client directory, so everything inside the server directory only gets loaded to the server. And these are all pretty similar, except for one major difference is that if you create a file that is run on both the client and the server and you use a Meteor.isServer check, that code inside the Meteor.isServer check will be loaded to the client. It just won't run on the client, but it'll be visible on the client. So you don't want to put anything secret in there, like some secret API key that you want to put either in a server.js file or inside a file that's in the server directory. So just keep that in mind. And anything else that's not in server.js or server, or client.js or client, will get loaded to both. So let's say I create a foo.js file, that'll get loaded to both, and inside of there I would use a Meteor.isServer check if I only wanted to run a certain part of the code inside of server. Beyond that, there are a couple of other directories I want to mention. The first is lib. So if you create a lib directory, that'll be used in both, and the code inside of lib directory gets run first. So you want to use that if you're setting up some sort of configuration, or when you're setting up your collections, as we'll see later. You want to put that inside a lib directory or a lib file, and that'll get loaded before the rest of the code. Otherwise, Meteor loads the code in alphabetical order based on the file name, and also it loads the deepest nested directories first. So if you have /server/ some directory, some other directory, that code will get loaded before /server and files in there. So just keep that in mind, that it loads deepest nested code first. You can also create a lib directory inside of server and client, and what that'll do is it'll load the code only to the server or the client, but it'll load everything inside the lib directory first. So that's pretty useful as well. And the second directory I want to mention is public. So if you create a public directory, everything you put in there will be accessible publicly as an asset. So let's say your images and fonts, you'd want to put them in there so that you can call them using an image tag or whatever. And I just want to look quickly over how to structure projects. Generally, the simplest way to structure it would be to have a lib directory for shared code, and everything in there will get loaded first. A client directory for client-only code with a lib directory inside of there for stuff that needs to get loaded first on the client. A server directory for server-only code, and same with a lib directory in there for code that needs to be loaded first on the server. And then a public directory, and I usually have a fonts and images subdirectory for my fonts and images. But we'll work with this as we develop our apps, so you don't need to worry about too much right now. I just wanted to mention how Meteor works at loading files and loading code to specific environments. So let's have a look at Blaze. Inside of Blaze, we create templates, and templates are basically UI segments. So you can take your HTML and break it down into segments called templates. And to create a template, we basically create a template tag and give it a name. So you give it an attribute name, and you give that the name you want. And then inside of there, you just write standard HTML. And then to include your template inside of your code somewhere, you use the curly braces syntax. So double curly braces, greater than symbol, and then the name of your template, and that'll include your template wherever you put that. And we'll see that in code shortly. I just want to look at a couple of the things we can do inside of templates. The first of which is if statements. So same, we use the double curly braces syntax and hashtag or # if, and you get an if statement. So in this case, we can check if logged in, we write the message welcome back, and if logged in was false, then welcome back would not appear on the page. And similar to if, we have an unless statement, which is the opposite of if. So in this case, if the user is not logged in, we write sign up now. And another thing we get is each, which is a loop, and it'll loop in this case through our array of to-dos and print out a to-do template. And Meteor will, or Blaze will automatically give the template the data from the current to-do in our array of to-dos. And we'll see that in code, it'll make more sense. And finally, we can extend our HTML templates using JavaScript, and we get a couple of functions. The first is template.helpers, and that allows us to set up helpers for our templates. And helpers generally provide the template with data. So in here we'd have a function, say if we wanted a title for our header, we'd create a function called title, and that would return the value of the header, and then inside our header template we'd simply print out the title. And template events helps you make your templates dynamic. So let's say you have a button and you want something to happen when we click that button. We set up an event for the button click and some function that'll handle what happens when the button is clicked. So now let's take a look at some code. If you remember, in our first video we used the Meteor create command to create our first project, which looks like this. It was simply a button, and when you click the button we can see how many times we've clicked the button. And to see how this actually works, let's dive into the code. So first let's look at the HTML file, in which we can see that we have a template named hello, and inside of the template we have a button and a paragraph with the number of times we've clicked the button being printed using a counter variable. So to see how this works, let's check out the hello world.js. And in here we can see we've defined our template helpers using template.hello.helpers, where hello is the name of the template. And inside of here we have a counter, which is a function that returns the current value of the counter gotten from the session. And session in Meteor is a key value store that's reactive. And what that means is basically when the session gets updated, Meteor will automatically update whichever templates rely on the session, based on whichever helpers are using the session. And session has basically two functions. You can get a value and you can set a value. As we can see here, when we click the button, we set the counter to session.get counter value, so we get the current value and we add 1 to it. And session is useful for this kind of stuff where you want to have some data that's stored temporarily for one user, so it won't be sent to the server or anything. It's just for the current session, and it will get cleared out when the user closes the tab or refreshes the page. And we'll be using that for some of our UI components later. So you can see here that we've defined the template events, click button, and when we define events, we first put the action, so in this case click, and the DOM object we want to have that action on, so in this case button. Usually you would have maybe something with a class or an ID, so let's say we want, if we had more than one button on this page, it'd be a problem, because if we clicked any of those buttons it would run this event, which we might not want. So let's change this, for example, to a class of increment counter. And now if I go to my app, wait for it to refresh, and you'll see now this does nothing. So if we go here and give the button a class of increment counter, now this should work again, and it does. So mostly when you define events, you'll be using either a class or an ID, so that you can control better which elements are calling the events. So let's try and make something a bit more complicated than just a button counter. Let's make a to-do list. So I'm going to start off by clearing out the Meteor code. And before I continue, I just want to talk briefly about this head and body segment. Meteor will automatically find these, doesn't matter which file you define them in. I like to create a main.html file and define them in there. We'll see that in the future, but basically if you want a head and you'll need a body so that you can load your basic template, you can put them anywhere, just as long as you only write them once. So don't create more than one head and more than one body tag, or Meteor will throw an error. So let's start our to-dos list by creating a to-dos template. So to create a template, we just create a template tag, give it a name, and I misspelled template, a name, let's call it to-dos list, and in here we can write our code. And the first thing I'm going to do is change hello to template, because the hello template doesn't, sorry, not template, to-dos list, because our hello template no longer exists. And let's try this out by putting an h3 to-dos. And let's have a look. We can wait for Meteor to refresh. Might be, oh, I have an error. Yes, there we go. So that's a good point. If your Meteor app isn't refreshing as you expect, always check the console and you can see errors. So in this case, I had an error because I misspelled template. So let's see. Now I had to manually refresh because sometimes when you get an error, Meteor won't be able to refresh the page. Anyway, now it's working. We have our to-dos. And actually, let's remove this. Okay. So now we want to print out a list of to-dos. And to do that, we can use the each helper. So let's say each to-dos. And to end it, you just write and each. And let's just print out a to-do template. So to do that, we write to-do. This will include the to-do template, and of course we need to create the to-do template. So let's create it, to-do, and in here I'm simply going to write out the label. Of course, if we look at our page, we're not going to see anything because we're not providing a list of to-dos to our loop. So to do that, we go to our hello world.js file and create template helpers. So template dot, then we put in our template name, so to-do list dot helpers, and in here we create our helpers. So as I mentioned earlier, here we're looping through to-dos, so we need to name our helper to-dos. And that will be a function which will return a list of to-dos. For now, we're just going to create our own list. So let's give it a label of by milk. So first to-do, just going to copy that. Let's say get cat food. And let's create a third one. Wash the car. So now if we have a look at our to-dos, we should see, maybe we have an error. Oh, we have an error again. So I have this error, template is not defined, and that is because I created the template helpers in a file which is run on both the server and the client, and the server does not have the template constant as defined, so I need to wrap this inside of an if statement in which we check if Meteor is client, then we create the helpers. And now let's see, yes, Meteor server restarted, and we have our list of to-dos. So keep in mind that templates can only be defined on the client, and the reason I forgot is because I usually create the template helpers inside of client-only files, and in this case it was a client and server file, so I forgot to add the Meteor is client check. But anyway, back to our to-dos. So now we can see we have a list of to-dos which is provided by our template helper. Let's quickly make this a little prettier by creating a UL, and then I'm going to create the list items inside of the to-do template itself. So there we go. And as I mentioned before, Blaze is automatically passing the right data to our to-do template each time it loops through to-do. So it'll pass the current to-do, and that's why we can just say label and print it out. Now let's say we wanted to cross out to-dos that we've already completed. And to do that, we're going to use an if statement, and let's create a class of .done in our CSS file, and that's going to add a text decoration of line through. Then in our template, we can say class is equal to, and then the double curly braces syntax, if done, we'll print out done, and end the if statement, and there we go. Let's go back to our to-do helpers, and let's say the first one will be done. And there we go. Now we've crossed out our first to-do. So you can see I simply added a done attribute to our to-do object, and here I'm checking if done is true, then we add the class done, and that's just a label. An important thing to note is that when adding classes dynamically like this, you must add class equals and then do the if statement in here. If you try to do something like this, in which we put the class attribute inside of the if statement, Meteor is going to throw an error because it doesn't like that. And the logic here would be that we only want class to be shown if it's done, because there's only this class. So if it's not done, we don't want an empty class attribute, but you don't need to worry about that because Meteor will automatically remove the class attribute if it's empty. So that's why it works like that. So just remember, always put your if statements inside the brackets and don't inside the quotes, and don't have the attribute name inside of an if statement. That will, it's not just for class, for any attribute, that will always throw an error. So now we have our simple list of to-dos with the first one striked out. And actually, let me show you how unless works. So in this case, I'm going to put unless done, add the class done. So this is just going to reverse this. So these aren't done, but they're strike through because I used unless. It's the exact opposite of if. So it basically saves you the trouble of going if not done, which, as you can see, is not going to work because Meteor doesn't like having these special characters in your template helpers. So now let's continue and go back to our proper if statement. Let's say we want to add a to-do to the list. How would we do that? Well, we want to create an event. Let's start by adding a button, and for now we're just going to be adding a generic to-do. We'll look at forms later. So for now we'll just add a to-do with a fixed label. So let's create a button, give it a class of add to-do, and add to-do. So let's have a look. Yep, it doesn't do anything yet. Let's go to our JavaScript file and create the events. Template dot to-dos list dot events, and same with helpers. We pass it an object in which we define keys, which are the event itself. So click, and since I'm using the class, I'm going to put dot add to do, and that returns a function. And now we want to add a to-do to our to-dos list, but because it's in a helper, we've hard-coded it into the helper, we can't exactly do that. So let's take this out of the helper and create a variable up here called to-dos. And now we can say todos dot push. And so if you don't know what dot push is, it just adds an element to an array. So in this case, we'll be adding a new to-do. Let's give it a label of new to-do. And just for good measure, I'm going to add a console.log call here, so we can see in the console that we called this, and you'll see why in a second. So let's go back to our browser and wait for me to refresh. Now if I click, you'll see nothing happens. And why is that? Well, let's check our console. And the function was definitely called because it's printing out our add to do console.log. And the reason the to-dos isn't showing up here is because our to-dos var here is not a reactive data source. And Blaze will only update the UI when there are changes to a reactive data source. And primarily that would be either the session object or a collection. So instead of defining our to-dos as a simple variable, let's make it a session variable. So session.set to-dos, and we pass it our array of to-dos. And here we get session.get to-dos, and let's just check that this works. Yes, it does. And now to add a to-do, we need to get the array of to-dos. So to-dos is equal to session.get to-dos to get the current list of to-dos. Then we push a new to-do into that list, and then we need to set the updated list of to-dos. So set to-dos to to-dos. And now we should see this update when we click on add to-dos. Yeah, there we go. So that's the thing to keep in mind, is that Blaze will only update when there's a change to a reactive data source, which includes sessions and collections, and you can actually create your own reactive variables, but we'll see that later in the advanced tutorials. In most cases, we'll be using the collection. In this case, it makes no sense to use the session for storing to-dos, because as you can see, if I refresh the page, my to-dos that I added are gone, because session is not a persistive storage, so it's just for the current session, and refreshing the page actually clears the session. So you would use session basically just for something like menu is open or things like that, that are only for the current user currently acting. You wouldn't really store data in the session. And that's pretty much it for the basics of Blaze. So in the next video, we're going to have a look at collections, and we'll be moving our to-dos to a collection where we can actually do more advanced stuff, like adding, updating our to-dos and adding new to-dos with not just a new to-do name. So in the previous video, we set up a simple to-dos list to which we can add a default to-do, and we used the session to store our to-dos list, but that's not a good way to do it. For one reason is that if I refresh the page, our new to-dos are gone, and basically that's not what the session is designed for. And that's where collections come in. Now, collections are a way to interact with your database, and in the case of Meteor, we have both a database on the server and the client. By default, it's mongoDB on the server and Minimongo on the client. Now, collections will let you insert, update, remove, and fetch data from both Mongo and Minimongo, and they use the same API for both, so you write code once, and it'll work for both the server and the client. So let's change our to-do list so that it uses a collection instead of the session. So the first thing we're going to do is create our collection. And generally, when creating collections in Meteor, you would make them a global. So let's say our to-dos collection will be called to-dos. And you'll notice we didn't put var, because if we put var, it becomes a variable and it's scoped only to this file, so it won't be available elsewhere, which is important when we're working with multiple files. So also the convention is to start with a capital letter because it's global. So to-dos is going to be a new, and to create a collection you go mongo.collection with a capital C, and then you give it a name, so let's call this to-dos. And this will create a collection in our database called to-dos. To interact with our collection, we simply call methods on the to-dos global. So let's start by fetching our to-dos. Rather than getting from the session, we're going to do to-dos.find, and basically that will return all of the to-dos in our collection, which is fine for now. And let's take a look at this in the browser. And our to-dos are gone since our to-dos collection is empty. Now let's insert something into the to-dos collection. And let's start by doing that directly inside of the database. And in Meteor, you can interact with your database by writing Meteor.mongo command. I just opened a new tab and you should be in the same directory as your project, the root directory. And write Meteor.mongo, hit enter, and that will open up the mongoDB command line. And in here we can write commands. So let's insert a new to-do. And to do that, we write db dot and then the name of your collection, in this case to-dos. And here we're using to-dos as the collection name, not the to-dos object. And insert. And then the documents are just simple JavaScript objects, so JSON objects. So let's create our to-do, which has a label of first to-do, and let's give it a created at attribute so that later on we can sort them by the date of creation. And to do that, it's just new date. And this is just JavaScript, so you can write JavaScript right in the Mongo console. And let me just check everything's good. That should work. If I insert it, you'll see immediately that our new to-do appeared right in our to-dos list. That's because collections are a reactive data source, and when something changes in a collection, Blaze will automatically update the UI. Now, several things actually happened here. Because we inserted the collection, the to-do, into the to-dos collection straight on the database, we didn't actually interact with Meteor at all, but Meteor still knows that there was a new to-do added to the database, and it sent that down from the server to the client, inserted into Minimongo, and then Blaze refreshed the UI for us. So there's a whole lot of things happening for us, and we've basically written 1-2 lines of JavaScript, well, if you include these 4 or 5, and then our simple template, which just loops through them. So with just a few lines of code, we've done something quite amazing, actually. And that's really the power of Meteor, is to simplify these complicated tasks. It basically takes care of all the complicated stuff for you. It's almost like magic. So now let's add a couple more to-dos. Let's call it second to-do and third to-do. And just watch the Chrome window in the background when I hit enter, and there you go. You can see automatically updating. Now that's nice, but of course we don't want to be inserting our data straight into the database. Another way you can do it is through the console. So since we created our collection in our JavaScript file as a global, I have access to it in the console. So I can go to-dos.insert, and in here I can create my to-do. So let's say label is console to-do, and created at is a new date. And now you can see it appeared here immediately. So that's a couple of ways we can interact with the database. But of course, in your application, you wouldn't do that. It's useful for debugging, but now let's add our to-do through the click of our button. So I'm going to remove all this session stuff, and it's basically the same APIs we used here. So we use todos.insert and then our new to-do. So let's add label new to-do and create it as a new date. And now if we wait for the page to refresh, and you can see we can now add new to-dos, and unlike the session, if I refresh the page, our new to-dos are still here. So they're stored in the database and they're there permanently. Now let's say I want to mark a to-do as done, and if you remember, we had this if done, it adds the class done, which will strike it through. So now we want to add the ability to mark to-dos as done. Let's do that by adding a checkbox to our to-dos. So in here, I'm going to add an input type checkbox. And let's just keep it there. Since there's only one per to-do, we can just use checkbox. We don't need to add an ID or class. And now I need to create a template.todo.events, and let's create a click input. Let's mark our to-do as done. So here we need to write to-dos dot update, and we need to pass first a way for the command to find the to-do we want to update, and then what we want to update. So what we want to update is done to true, and to find it, we're going to use the ID. So we're going to do underscore ID. In MongoDB, the documents always have an ID, and the ID is always underscore ID. So to get the ID of the current to-do we're clicking on, we do this dot ID, and this will be set to the data of the current to-do inside of the template events. So when we loop through the templates, this will be equal to the current to-do inside of events. So let's save that and try it out. And when I click here, oh, it disappears. Not sure why I done. Well, something's happening. Let's try and figure this out. So let's take a look at our todos.find. If I simply write todos.find, it's going to return a cursor, and we'll see what that is later. But to get an array of our data, I need to go find.fetch, and here we have our objects. So let's take a look. Done is true. Right, I'm missing the label. The label was removed because I didn't do my update right. If you simply pass a document into update, it's going to replace the entire document in the database. That's just how MongoDB works. So instead of that, we're going to write set and then our update document. Now this is going to update the fields instead of overwriting the entire document. So now if I save, wait for Meteor to refresh, and now my to-dos are marked as done instead of having their label removed. So keep that in mind. Always use set when updating, otherwise you're replacing the entire document. So now we have our to-dos getting marked as done, but when I click on this, again, it's not marking as undone, which would be, I think, what the users would expect. So let's have a condition here where we mark true as we mark done as is done, and let's say is done. We're going to check if the to-do is already done and return the opposite of that. So let's say todos.find one. Find one will find one document in the database. It'll return the first one that matches our query, and we're going to copy this since we're going to be looking for it by ID, and it's going to return, oops, I forgot my equal sign. So we're going to find one to do by the ID, and we're going to get the done variable from there, and we're going to set done to the opposite of that. So let's try this out and wait for Meteor to refresh, and now you can see if I click first to do, it's been marked as done. If I click again, it's undone. And here it's a bit messed up because our checkboxes, if I refresh the page, all start off as unchecked, but these have been done, so they should be checked, because now when I check it, it undoes it. So let's fix that, and we're going to create a new helper on our, or actually we need to create the helper object for our to-do template. So let's say to-do template.todo.helpers, and let's create a done helper. And this is going to return the todos.findOne.done, same as here. And then in our HTML, we want to mark checked as if checked. We put checked, close the if statement. So basically now if, oops, not if checked, if done. So if done, checked, checked will be checked. So by default now our checked to-dos should be checked. And there we have it. So now this one is done and the check mark is checked. If I check that one and I refresh the page, we can see it works. So now we have these empty to-dos here without the title because of our error at the beginning. So let's fix that by adding the ability to remove to-dos. So let's say for now we're just going to put a button at the end of each to-do, put an X, and let's give it a class of delete. Now in our JS, we add a new event for click on .delete, and let's say function. Now we're going to remove a to-do, so I'm just going to copy. Actually, I'll just write. So todos.remove, and in here we need to pass it some sort of way for it to find the to-do we want. So we'll do the same ID this dot underscore ID, and that should remove our to-do. Let's have a look. Wait for Meteor to refresh, and yes, now we can remove our to-dos. So let's do one more thing and add the ability to sort our to-dos by the created at date. And to do that, we're going to start off by setting an option in the todos.find call. Now the first object you would give here would be some sort of identifier to filter our objects. So some ID or something, but since we want to return all of the to-dos, we're going to leave that empty. And in the options, which is the second object, we can add sort, and that's an object, and then we add the key we want to sort by and the sort order. Now sort order is something we're going to want to change, so that's a good place to use the session. So let's make it session.get and sort order, and then let's set a default value for our sort order. So session.set the sort order, and let's make it 1 by default. And sorting works both 1 or -1. So 1 is ascending and negative 1 is descending. So in this case, we'll start with the ascending order by default. And now we want to add a way to switch between ascending and descending. So let's start off by adding a button in our template. Let's see, button, and let's give it an ID of reverse sort. And let's just give a label also, reverse sort. And then we need to create a helper for that. So in our to-do list, an event for that, sorry. So in our to-do list events, let's say click, and when using an ID, you put the hash. So we called it reverse sort, and then our function, and that's just simply going to change the session variable for our sort order. And since we're switching between 1 and -1, we can simply get the current value and change that by multiplying it by -1. Since -1 multiplied by -1 becomes a +1, and +1 multiplied by -1 becomes -1. So let's have a look at that. And now when I click this, we're changing the order of our sorts. So now first to do is last, reverse sort, first to do is first. And just to be sure it's working, let's print out the date of the to-do created at. So I'm going to add created at here. It's going to be ugly, but at least we'll know. So let's see. Created at 14:51 and 21 seconds, 14:51, 29 seconds. If I reverse, they've correctly been reversed, and all the rest still works fine. So that's it for the basics of collections. We've learned how to set up our collection. Again, you would create a global and assign it a new Mongo collection, giving a collection name, and the standard is to give your global a capital letter first, and your collection name would start with a small letter. If we had a multiple word collection, let's say to-dos collections, you would use camel casing, and same thing here. So let's say that's the standard way of doing it. And then we learned how to fetch documents from our collection. So todos.find, and in here, if we wanted, we could put some sort of identifier, and here we can pass options like sort, and there's a whole bunch of other options we can give it, and actually you can check those on the mongoDB website. Then we learned how to insert documents into the collection by doing collection.insert and passing it a document. And same thing for update, todos.update, so collection.update, and here you need to pass some sort of identifier. Usually that would be the ID, and when doing inside of events, you can use this dot something, and that will have the value of the current document in an array. So that's very useful. And remember, when setting the update document, don't forget to add set, because otherwise you'll be replacing your document with whatever you add here. So in our case, we ended up with a document that only had the done attribute and didn't have a label. And finally, you can remove items from a collection by doing collection.remove and passing in some sort of identifier. And so that's the basics of collections. But before we move on, I just want to show you how collections and sessions differ from the point of view of having two browsers. So I'm going to open up Safari here, and in a new browser, basically it'll be as if it was a different user. So let's bring up Safari on the right here and Chrome on the left. There we go. And now let's add a new to-do, and you can see it appears in both because that's being added to the server database, so it'll be pushed down to both clients, which is very cool. If I reverse sort, however, you can see it doesn't affect Chrome because we're using the session to do that, and the session is only local to the one user. So that's the kind of big difference between a local change and storing stuff to the database. And the same works for updating and removing. You can see it's updating both. So as we move on, we'll be doing more advanced collection stuff, such as limiting which documents are sent to the client, adding some security checks, so making sure not everyone can add to-dos or delete to-dos or modify other people's to-dos, and so on. But for now, we're going to start the next video by having a look at packages and Meteor's package environment. So now let's have a look at packages. And firstly, what are packages? In Meteor, packages are basically a bunch of code written by someone else that you can include into your project to add functionality. And this can range from anything as simple as some nice buttons to adding a new database type, such as MySQL, and really anything in between. So there's account systems, there's just utilities, there's pretty much a package for everything. And the way to find packages for Meteor is to go to atmosphere.js.com, and that's the official Meteor package repository. And on here we can see some trending packages, recently added packages, most used packages, and top searches. I'd recommend having a look through the most used and trending packages from time to time, just to see what's really good and useful for your app. And actually, as you can see in most used, we have session, and that's the same session we used earlier, and it's actually just a Meteor package that's part of the core Meteor build. And Meteor itself is actually just a bunch of packages put together. So now let's try adding a package to our Meteor app. The to-dos list we created earlier is not very good looking, so let's start by adding Bootstrap, Twitter's front-end library for basically building your UI, and Twitter Bootstrap. And to add packages in Meteor, we simply run a command Meteor add and then the name of the package. Actually, first you have the name of the package author and then colon the name of the package. But if you go to Atmosphere, you can simply copy this and then go to your console, stop your Meteor app by putting Control-C. That'll stop the process, and then paste in the command, hit enter, and now it's going to install Twitter Bootstrap for us. Now it's going to take a little bit of time to download the package, and there we go. Twitter Bootstrap has been added to our Meteor app. And to restart the app, we simply run the Meteor command. And what that did was it basically installed a package which adds all the Bootstrap, CSS, and JavaScript files. So now we can start using them in our project, and actually once the app loads up, we can see that our app looks already quite different. We've had the default Bootstrap styles applied to it, but let's make it look a bit better. The first thing we're going to do is create a container for our app, so container fluid, and this is just Bootstrap stuff. So if you want to learn about that, go to the Twitter Bootstrap website, and then let's say a row, and let's make it 4, and actually let's put I think it was large offset and 4 so that it is centered. And let's have a look at that. Yep, there we go. And let's make our buttons a bit prettier by adding classes to them. So class button default, and I'm just going to copy this and add it to all of our buttons so they look a little bit better. And we're not going to go too much into styling because that's not the point of the video, but just to show you how easy it is to add something like Twitter Bootstrap, and our app looks a little bit better and still works as it did previously. So let's have a look at some other packages that we can find on Meteor. Let's see the most used packages. So the first ones are usually the ones part of the Meteor core, because those are basically installed in every Meteor app. But as we go down the list, we can see there's a package for sending emails. This is a very useful package for helping to validate our collections when data is inserted or updated. Let's see, we have accounts packages like accounts Facebook, which adds login functionality through Facebook, and we'll be using that later. So there's really a whole bunch of packages. And just to show you, another way to add packages is by opening the Meteor hidden folder and going to the packages file. And in here, you basically have a list of all the packages you have installed. These first ones are the Meteor default packages, and we can see here our Bootstrap package. And if I want to add, let's say I'm going to add some sort of package, let's say the email package for now, and I can simply copy the package name, write it into the packages file, and Meteor will automatically install it. And there we go, it's been added. So now we have the email package. So you can either edit this file or run the Meteor install command, add command. And to remove a package, simply do the opposite. Meteor remove, I'm going to remove the email package. So that's going to remove it. Or let me restart Meteor, or then you could have just removed it from here, but Meteor did that for me. So that's the two ways to install packages. I actually prefer writing them directly into the packages file, because that way I can organize them nicely and I don't have to restart my Meteor app every time I want to add a package. One thing to look out for on certain packages that start with MRT as the package author, those are old packages using the old packaging system, and you shouldn't install those because they most likely won't work with the current version of Meteor. So avoid MRT packages, and you can see actually they've been flagged as not working. So keep that in mind, but most of the packages on Atmosphere are available and work perfectly fine. So far we've created a pretty useful to-do list, apart from one problem, is that we can't create our own custom to-dos. We only have this new to-do. And to make our own to-dos, we're going to need a form. Now, Meteor doesn't have its own form handling solution, but there are several packages out there that will help us with that. But first I want to show you how you could do it without a package, because for a simple project like this to-do list, we wouldn't necessarily want to install a package. So let's take a look at how we would do that. Now, the first thing we want to do is create our form. So let's go, and we're going to put it at the top of our to-do list. So actually, let's remove this add to-do button and create a form. And we're simply going to have one input for the to-do name. So input type text, name is going to be label. And I'm going to go ahead and give this an ID of to-do form, and that'll help us when we create the template event handler. So basically we need an input, and we're actually going to submit the form when we hit enter, so I'm not going to add a submit button. And let's have a look at that. So there's the input, and of course if I type in something now, hit enter, nothing happens. Well, I'll refresh the page because the form is automatically submitted, as you can see in the URL. But now let's go ahead and add the event handler that will take care of this. So let's go to our hello world.js, and since this is in the to-do list template, I'm going to add it here. And I'm going to add a submit event for our form that has an ID of to-do form. I think, yes, to-do form. And that's a function. And now we want to use the first parameter, which is event. So that will pass in the event, which is the form submission event. And first thing we want to do is prevent the normal event handler, because as we saw when I hit enter, it submitted the form and brought us to the URL with the form query. So we want to prevent that. So what we do is event.prevent default, and that'll stop it from submitting the form. Now we want to get the data from the form, so let's create an object. Let's see, var to do is going to be an object, and basically we only need the label. So we have the label property, and to get the value of our input, we're going to use jQuery, and we're going to use event.target. So that will select the DOM object that was the target of our event, so in this case the form, and inside of that we need to find the input with the name of label. Sorry, name of label. And so this is just going to look for anything with name equals label attribute, and since we only have one input with that, that's fine. And then .val to get the value, and that's it. This will create an object with the label set to the label I've entered, and now we just need to create a new to-do. So I'm going to cut this out of here and actually remove this event because we won't have the to-do button anymore. And I'm going to add it here. Oops. Sorry, I accidentally cut instead of pasted. Okay, there we go. So here, and instead of that, let's take this created at and add it in here. And then to-dos, we're going to insert our to-do. And that should do it. Let's give it a test. Wait for Meteor to refresh. And let's try form to-do. And yes, it works. Although it would be good if the form was reset after we submit it. So let's quickly add that. And to do that, we simply need to do again event.target, and here we need to add 0 because event.target is actually an array of matched DOM objects. So even though we only have one, it's still an array. So we take the first one and let's call reset on it, and that should do it. So let me just wait for Meteor to refresh and try new to do. And when I hit enter, yes, we can see that the form was reset. So that's basically it for simple form handling. We just basically create an event handler for the form submission event, and we get the values using jQuery. Now this is okay for simple forms and if you have maybe a couple of forms in your app, but if you're doing more than that, there are much better solutions that require a lot less code. And we're going to take a look at that now by adding a package. And the most popular Meteor package for form handling is called Autoform. So let's have a look at it on Atmosphere.js. So you can go ahead and search for Autoform, and we can see it here. And Autoform has really extensive documentation, so you can take a look at that. But I'm just going to show you how to create a basic form with it. So let's go ahead and add it to our project by copy pasting the package name into our packages file, and let's have a look at the console when Meteor installs it. And we can see that it actually installed 3 different packages. The first one being Autoform, the second is called Simple Schema, and the third is Moment from mongoDB. Now Simple Schema is a sort of companion package to Autoform, but it can also be used by itself, and it's designed to let you create schemas for your collections. So you can define what the documents should look like, what kind of fields they'll have, and what each field will contain. And it's useful for security and to make sure that the documents match your expectations. And Moment is a JavaScript library for working with dates and times. And actually, we're going to add one more package from the same author called collection2. And that allows us to take the schemas we define and attach them to our collections so that inserts and updates are automatically validated against our collection. And we'll see in a second what all of this does and means. But let's start by replacing our form here with a quick form, and that's one of the ways you can create forms with AutoForm is using the quick form template. So you just include the quick form template, and then it needs a few things, the first of which is an ID. So let's give it an ID of to-do form, and next we should give it a collection so it knows which collection it's working with. In this case it's the to-dos collection, and then this is going to be an insert form for creating new to-dos, so we give it a type of insert. And if we have a look at our site now, you can see that we get an error, and that's because the schema has not been defined. So we need to give our collection a schema before we can use AutoForm with it. So let's go ahead and create a schema. And a schema is basically an object with definitions of fields in it. And to create it, let's do to-do schema is equal to new simple schema. And then we pass that an object in which we define our schema. Now we only have two fields, so let's go ahead and define them. Label, and every field needs a type. So in this case, it's a string. Our label is just a string. And let's go ahead and give it a max value, and that will limit how long of a string we can input. Let's say 200, so that people can't write a whole essay as a to-do. And then we need the created at, which has a type of date. And that should do it. Now, one last thing we need to do is actually attach our schema to our to-dos collection. And thanks to collection2, the package, we can just do our collection name, so to-dos, attach schema, and then we pass the schema, so to-dos schema. And now it should work. Let's have a look. And a couple of things to notice here. The first is that AutoForm is using the Bootstrap template. We can see it's styled the inputs and buttons as it would with Bootstrap. And that's because AutoForm has these themes, and by default it uses the Bootstrap theme. So if you're not using Bootstrap in your project, you can check out the documentation. They have a list of available themes here. And then there's all sorts of other add-on packages for AutoForm. And the second thing to notice is that it's actually added this created at input. And we don't really want that because we want the created at date to be set automatically to the current date and time. But let's just go ahead and test this out. So we go new to-do AutoForm and set the current date and submit. And we can see it works, but it actually added two to-dos. And the reason for that is that we didn't remove our old form submission handler, and that's creating its own to-do. So let's get rid of that. Go back and try again. Let's see. And now it's working just fine, just adding one. Let's remove these. And we can see also that AutoForm automatically clears the form for us, which is nice. So let's fix this created at issue. We want to remove that from our form so that it's not an input. And we can use this omit fields attribute and give it the name of the fields we want to omit. So in this case, created at. And if you had multiple fields, you could separate them by commas or pass it just a JavaScript array of strings instead of a string. And let's have a look. That should remove the created at input. It does, but now the problem is if I try creating a new to-do, it's, oops, wrong button. It's not working because now the created at attribute is not being set, and it's required by the schema. So to fix that, we can do default value and simply give it a new date. And now it should work again. Let's try this. Yes, our new to-do was added. So now we have our form created with AutoForm instead of a custom form and event handler. And it's actually a lot less code because basically we just use this quick form template and create a schema. And on top of that, we get the added bonus of security. So now people can't insert random things into the database. And we can try this out. Let's say I set the max to-do label length to 10, and I try to write something longer than 10. It's not going to let me do that. See, it actually blocks the input. And if I inspect that, I can see that the input has been giving a max length property of 10. So the input won't accept more than 10 characters. And let's try submitting our form with an empty input. We can see that AutoForm actually shows us error messages as well, which is really great. Saves us a lot of work. Now let me show you one last way to create forms, which is also using AutoForm. And this lets you create a bit more customized forms, so you define the inputs yourselves. So if you wanted to add some structure or something to it, you could do that. And to do that, we create an AutoForm template this way. So open AutoForm, end AutoForm. And oops, yes, here we need to put a hash, not the greater than sign. And then if we take a look at this, I'm just going to remove the omit fields attribute because it doesn't apply in this case. Let's take a look. I actually have an error. Oh, I misspelled AutoForm. There we go. And take a look at that. Actually, there is no more form because we haven't defined any inputs. And to define inputs, we add input templates. And those are called AF quick field, so AutoForm quick field. And then we need to give it an attribute of name. In this case, let's add the label field. And then we just close that. Now we should have the label field. And let's try adding a new to-do. So new to-do 3. And it works. And actually, in this case, we don't have the submit button because we didn't add a submit button. And since that's actually the way we originally designed our form, I think it works out nicely. So that's basically it for the basics of form handling. We'll have a look in future videos at more advanced stuff, more complicated forms and custom form handling using AutoForm. But for now, we have our to-do list that's functional. And next video, we're going to be taking a look at publications and subscriptions.